Hello, everybody. Hello, Zeno. And I've got to turn this off. Yeah. It's always a glitch. Anyway, thank you all for coming. It's Wednesday, and I do my monthly Miner edition. And this is an interesting one. Let me see. Testing the volume. And I do my... Yes, we got volume. Sorry about yesterday. There's a weird glitch within YouTube where there was a slight sound delay between my voice and the actual audio. But let's jump in. So the mission today is to discover, are there miners that beat Bitcoin? And should we have them in our portfolio? The question is deep. We will look at literally 8,000 data points. And we've got some really cool scoop on a couple of cool miners as well. I also have some new ratios. And I skewed the focus of my financial ratios as well. By the way, this is a masterclass in financial analysis for stocks, which you have to learn for analyzing other stocks too. But these are fascinating because they're a proxy of Bitcoin. Now, I've also built some new ratios in here based on the cycle and where we are going. Because less than 300 days from now, the reward will be halved. And unless you are fit and strong as a miner, you may not be able to make it. And that's a big part of this focus. We also have a new winner. Very interesting too, and I bet you're all dying to find out who that is. So let's jump in. Of course, this is not financial advice. And if you want to amplify your intelligence with the most breadth of financial freedom content on Earth, this is the place to be. So subscribe. And now the companies I'm analyzing today are as follows. We are going to look at ARGO, CleanSpark, HUT, HIVE, Marathon, Bitfarms, RIOT, Wolf, and Iris Energy. And it's also always very interesting to see how they compare to Bitcoin. Bitcoin actually, as we speak right now, is at exactly $30,030. It has been a huge week ever since the cool snapping opportunity we had at 25021. That was like 7 days ago. And a lot has happened. And the proxies have gone wild. Let's look. Let's look at the miner performance year to date. Bitcoin has done incredibly well. Bitcoin is up 81% year to date. But look at this. ARGO is underperforming Bitcoin at only up 70% year to date. But the rest have smashed it. Marathon is up 260%. RIOT 246%. Iris Energy 240%. HUT 237%. A huge part of that is over the last few days. Bitfarms 230%. HIVE 147%. CleanSpark 137%. Wolf exactly 137% as well. So these things are bonkers and they are screeching far ahead of Bitcoin. And that's why I believe, especially in this cycle where we are, it's good to have some miners in your portfolio as a proxy. But let's look at where we are in the actual Bitcoin cycle. So this is from the top and bottom indicator, one of our products. And here you can see where we are. I put in the blue line to show the bottoms of the bear. And in reflection, you can see where we are now. We're in that beautiful lime green color. And we have a long way to go up. We're about 30% up at this time. And this time is different in many respects. A lot of people now are talking about a black swan that's going to hit before the halving. But that's just because maybe people have PTSD from C19 in March 2020. We'll see. The halving in 2020 was in May. The beautiful buying opportunity we had in March, triggered by C19, was a blessing. So who knows? That's why it's always good to have a little bit of cash on hand as well. But you can see here, we are moving up. We are well out of the bear market. In addition, miner reserves, the slight downtick. The miners have been moving their Bitcoin bags to exchanges to sell, to plug in rigs. And we'll talk a lot about that too, about current hash rates, future hash rates, and how much they're looking to expand. And in addition, the hash rate for Bitcoin is off the record high, down a bit, but you can see the trend is up and to the right. And this means, again, very importantly, as I said at the beginning, the reward is going to halve in less than 300 days. And if the price, I reckon, of Bitcoin is not at 55,000 or above by April, May 2024, nearly half the miners could go out of business. And that is concerning. Remember, they make money based on how much Bitcoin they mine. We're going to analyze all of that as we go forward. Let's look at some Bitcoin monthly returns so far as well. June up 10.38%, looking awesome compared to June last year, down 37%. That was a brutal June in that dark red there. But June is mixed. Sometimes it's up 27%, 15%, 10%. Sometimes 26%, sometimes 10.38%. But there's been a few times where it's been a real zinger, down 29% at the very beginning back in 2013, down 37% in 2022. But I think this time it's shaping up to be a good time. And we shall see. Even though the equivalent year would have been 2020, 2019, last time around, you know, we could go a lot higher in this month. And July is looking good too. August can be a bit sleepy. And of course, September sucks. S for sucks. But that's just September. So be ready for that as well. Now let's look at some news before we jump into the analysis. CleanSpark are buying 2 turnkey Bitcoin mining facilities. They just announced this literally 2 hours before I put this together. They're in Dalton, Georgia for about $9.3 million in cash. And the company expects the facilities to add about 1 exahash per second to its hash rate shortly after the deal is scheduled to close later this week. A very quick deal. And they have about 6,000 S19 XPs and a whole bunch of S19 Pros as well, which are kind of what you want to have after the next halving, because the rewards be less. You want the most efficient machines and, of course, very cheap electricity too. In other news, HODL, they had a monstrous week. The stock is up 19.6% at $2.75 in the midday session yesterday, and shares have tripled since the start of the year. And they're working on kind of an acquisition and a merger. It's all very complicated. Also, BitDigital were up 13.4% yesterday. Bitfarms, thank you, Mr. Hammer. Marathon Digital up 8.5%. CleanSpark 9.3%. RIOT 4.3%. So these proxies have been far outperforming Bitcoin, like we showed at the very beginning. So let's jump into another piece of news. Marathon are literally off the charts. They produced a record 1,245 Bitcoin in May, and that is up 77% from the previous month and 366% from a year ago. So Marathon are really, really turning it on and doing very, very well. Many people believe the hash rate would continue to go up and the miners wouldn't be able to produce as much. No, but they've been doing really well. So let's jump into a whole bunch of ratios. As usual, I skin this every which way you can imagine. Now, I am very focused on capital efficiency and operating ratios that determine whether or not they'll be able to survive post-halving next year. So here, we're looking at, first of all, the price to book ratios. This typically should be 1.5 or less. And the price to book is a subjective measure that varies, of course, depending on the industry. But I choose 1.5 for the miners. And a general rule of thumb, if you are under 1, or if you're at 1, it's fair value. Under 1, it's undervalued. And above kind of 1.5, you could argue it's overvalued. And here, per this analysis, you can see Iris Energy, CleanSpark, Bitfarms, HUT, all make it in on the price to book ratio. But those that are above 1.5, not so good, especially ARGO. Kind of a terrifying result there for those guys at the end. But remember, it's going to be a long journey. We're going to look at a ton of different ratios and then create a composite score of each and every one by each and every miner. And what's fascinating about miners is they're all completely different. No two are alike. Next is price to sales ratio. This should be typically 5 or less. Here, ARGO does very well. HIVE, Bitfarms, Iris Energy, CleanSpark. But the cutoff is 5, and you can see there it's 5.2 is for HUT. They just missed it. And then RIOT, Wolf, and Marathon. Again, expensive as we go forward. Let's start getting into the nitty-gritty of what miners are all about. First of all, this is a new ratio. This is looking at the current hash rate that the miner has and the future expected hash rate they'd expect to have a year from now. At the top of the chart is CleanSpark here. They currently have about 6,700 exahash, and they're going to go to 17,500 in very short order, they believe. And in fact, this doesn't even incorporate the acquisition they just made of another exahash. So by the end of the week, technically, you could argue they would have 7,700. Number 2, in terms of growth. Now, I rank these. Thank you, Mr. Manley. I rank these in terms of the current hash rate, but the growth to the future hash rate a year from now. And you can see here, Marathon goes up from 15,000 to 24,000. Then Bitfarms, 5,000 to 7,500. And then after that, we're not getting the parabolic rises. So I put together a different chart to illustrate the growth rate of hash rate. And you can see the clear winner is CleanSpark. They plan to increase their hash rate by 162% over the next 12 months. Marathon, 60%. Bitfarms, 48%. HIVE, 36%. Now, I also believe with the increasing difficulty of the Bitcoin network and increasing competition, if you're not planning to grow your hash rate, you're just going to be gobbled up by the bigger folks. That's why I place a lot of weight on this actual hash rate growth as we go forward. Next, let's look at miner production through June 2023. You can see the Marathon explosion up to the top, nearly 1,240 Bitcoin in the month of May, and that is off the chart. So well done, Marathon. Next in line, you can see is CleanSpark in yellow and then RIOT in orange. They're kind of the top three players. But check out Iris Energy. They're in blue fat line that's coming up as well, jumping, leapfrogging over all the competition. So you need to be able to watch exactly how these guys are doing it, and they're doing it by plugging in more rigs and becoming much more capital efficient as they go forward. So this is interesting to watch. Let's talk about share dilution. Very, very important. And there's some ugly news here. And I calculate this using Google Finance, by the way. So sometimes their numbers are perfectly accurate. Sometimes they may be off. I also have a history of the number of shares outstanding by every company. And these are all approximations. But this is the share dilution. And the biggest or the worst offender is CleanSpark at 44% share dilution. Number 2 is HUT at about 32% share dilution, and then HIVE about 31% share dilution, and then Bitfarms. And the rest, sometimes they're just not issuing stock. ARGO, Iris Energy, Marathon, RIOT's issuing a little bit. Wolf isn't very much. So the thing is, what is bad or good? So there's two ways for miners to scale. We talked about this number here, the massive amount of growth. They are doing that by issuing stock to be able to grow and be ready for the future. So that's the other way they can raise money too, not only selling their Bitcoin that they make, but that's just not enough to buy all the rigs that are required to grow the hash rate at that level. So what other companies do is they issue debt. Now remember, you can issue shares or issue debt. This is the other side of the coin here. You can see those companies that are issuing a lot of dilution don't have any debt. And that's what I want you all to take into account here. So you can see CleanSpark is the winner because they have got the least debt to asset ratio of all the other companies out there. The worst is ARGO. Second worst is Marathon at about 58% debt to asset ratio, and then about 54% for Wolf. Now this is kind of concerning, especially in a high interest rate environment, depending exactly how they are financing the debt. You don't want, if you have long-term debt structured at a very low rate, you're fine. But if you have trouble servicing that debt, it can be very expensive. Sometimes dilution is the best way to go. If you can issue shares, generate money, buy rigs, plug them in immediately. You can't have a delay between the share issuance and the actual plugging in of the rigs to generate hash rate. Let's look at another factor. This is the market cap per exahash. And the winner here is ARGO blockchain. They have the least amount of market cap per exahash. Now, this can be a good thing. Sometimes it's not. For example, if a company is on the verge of bankruptcy, shareholders flee and the market capitalization falls. But if they are healthy, you want this ratio to be low as possible. So number 1 is ARGO, number 2 is Iris Energy, number 3 is Bitfarms, and number 4 is CleanSpark. And then after that, it gets a lot more expensive. So if you are buying a company here, you can see that RIOT is the most expensive in terms of the most market cap per exahash, nearly $200,000. That is expensive. So when you're investing in that company with the amount of market cap that they have, you need to generate requisite ROI on that market cap for your share price to grow. But they have a big hurdle to climb in this regard. So let's jump ahead. Let's talk about hash rate and Bitcoin mined. A very cool set of ratios here too. Remember, it's not necessarily how big you are, but it's how much hash rate you have and how many Bitcoin you squeeze out of that hash rate. So here you can see you want a bit of a spread between the actual blue and the red. So the more distance between the higher up away from the blue, the better it is. Simple terms, i.e. Bitcoin mined needs to be bigger than the red, which is, no, the Bitcoin mined is the red, needs to be bigger than the blue. And you can see here the winners are names like CleanSpark, Bitfarms, HIVE, Iris Energy, and Marathon as well. The others, when it's a tight ratio, it's not so good. Now let's go to one of my other favorite ratios is the Bitcoin mined per exahash here. What's very interesting about this is that little red box I painted in. Obviously, HIVE is the winner. They are mining a lot of Bitcoin per exahash. They're running very effectively and very efficiently. But look how close the other three players are. Iris Energy is number 2, Bitfarms number 3, and CleanSpark number 4. But we are splitting hairs in terms of their mining efficiency, which is really good. Then down the line, you can see HUT is having a lot of challenges. Same with RIOT, same with ARGO, same with Wolf, and same with Marathon compared to the winners. Again, it's all about effectiveness and efficiency. Let's look at the next. There's another view of that exact chart as well. If you want to see the exact numbers, that's the actual market cap per exahash and the Bitcoin mined per exahash. And the clear winner is HIVE. But just to show you how close the next 3 players are, again, super tight. But it is also different that the market cap per exahash for HIVE is very high. And you can see for Iris Energy, it's very low, and ARGO, it's very low. But again, ARGO is not as efficient in mining Bitcoin per exahash. So very important things to consider. As I told you, no 2 miners are alike. Now let's talk about HODL bags. This is the Bitcoin amount that they hold on their balance sheet. And remember, when you have a week like the last week where Bitcoin goes up $5,000 in basically 7 days, this has a big impact for those companies that have a lot of Bitcoin on their balance sheet, like HUT8. Now, and also Marathon have a lot more. But what I did calculate as well, just to put that in perspective, is how much Bitcoin that represents at a price of $30,000 per Bitcoin as a percentage of the market cap today. And you can see here that nearly 70% of HUT8's market cap is the Bitcoin they have on the balance sheet. Now, if Bitcoin goes to 100,000, that can really help them out as they go forward. And you can see RIOT has about, I can't see that percentage, wonder why it's not there, about 15% of the market cap. Marathon, about 25%. HIVE, about 25% as well. And then the others just have a little bit of actual holdings as a percentage of market cap. In addition, let's look at what I believe is the most important ratio. I created this myself. This is the Miner ROI. And this is really the truest definition of effectiveness and efficiency for the miners. So what I do here is I calculate the Bitcoin mined per month times the average price per month and divide that by the market cap to get a percentage. So you can see the winner here is ARGO. They're pulling in about 7.46% of their market cap by mining Bitcoin and flipping it. Iris Energy number 2, 7.41%. Bitfarms number 3 at 5.2%, and CleanSpark number 4 at 5%. And you can see some of the others like RIOT as 0.98% of the Bitcoin ROI per market cap, HUT 1.11%, Marathon 2.23%. And despite the fact that, and this is the interesting thing, and it gets a little bit political, you know, if somebody has big bags of one of these names, they can get offended. But remember, we're in this game for upside. If the company is already richly valued, i.e. they've got a very high market cap to what they actually mine, it's not a good investment. There's no upside. But the other thing that's very important in this area, where there are companies scrambling for exposure to Bitcoin, they're buying miners willy-nilly. And they don't do this analysis, but they're buying the biggest names that have the most brand recognition, like Marathon, RIOT, etc. So that's a key thing to look for as we go forward. Now, a visual of the IA Miner ROI. You can see here the top 2 of ARGO and Iris Energy are very, very close. And then the other 2, but you want to kind of be in that red box. If you're not getting it up more than, say, 5% per month, it's not good. And the reason I mention this too, because remember, if the hash rate stays the same and the reward gets cut in half in 300 days, this turns into 2.5%. And that's not enough to pay the bills or survive. That's the big part of the focus today. What'll happen post-halving. So let's jump in. First of all, reminder, 10% rule. I do believe never good to hold 10% in any one proxy of Bitcoin as we go forward, and I use that across the board. So you won't see me with a position worth more than 10% of my Bitcoin holdings. So remember that, everybody, just in case something happens, and miners are more risky. In addition, this is based on a ton of ratios, a ton of data, and including some new ratios you probably never see anywhere else as well. And what I do is I build ratios on ratios to give you the straight skinny as to where we are. And summary, and I'll stress this one more time, Bitcoin mining is a cutthroat business. I've said that from day one. And I do believe from my analysis that if Bitcoin, this is kind of hopium for some people, see you out there, Mr. Mike, but if Bitcoin is not above $55,000 by April, May 2024, repeating this a second time, I do believe half of the miners could go out of business if the current hash rate remains level. And therefore, the price to sales and price to book are key. And the most important ratio is the IA Bitcoin ROI over market cap. If those guys are not dialed in, these companies could be in a world of hurt. They'll be forced to issue a lot of more shares, issue a lot more debt just to keep the lights on. But they will not be able to sustain that for a long period of time. So again, this is a nuclear arms race to get as many rigs as you can and plug them in. So now for the most exciting part, the actual results, everybody. And again, I create all these composite scores, ratios of ratios, and score them, rank them by equity. So here, the ones I took into account for this analysis today is price to book, price to sales, future hash growth, stock dilution, debt to asset ratio, market cap over exahash, Bitcoin mined per exahash, the amount that they HODL as a percentage of market cap, and the miner return on investment on a monthly basis. Very, very important, that last one. The color codes, you want to be green as much as possible. So you can see here, and these are stat ranked in terms of winners. The new winner today is Bitfarms, and they only got dinged a little bit on dilution, a little bit on HODL, and a little bit on debt to asset ratio. Number 2, CleanSpark. CleanSpark won the last analysis, by the way, but I dinged them bad on dilution. Price to sales not perfect, and the HODLing, they're not HODLing very much. And the third place player today is HIVE. They got dinged on price to book and dilution and market cap over exahash and the Miner ROI VIP, but the rest is very, very strong. The bottom of the list, unfortunately, based on my analysis and my ratios, is RIOT and Wolf. An important note on Wolf is they mine from nuclear energy, so they're the first completely carbon-free Bitcoin miner, so they have that kind of feather in their cap. But then you can look at the other names from the bottom. Wolf, Marathon, got dinged in many different areas because valuation, etc. Hut beat Marathon and Wolf. ARGO, a couple of big red squares, and Iris Energy. So that is the analysis today. And in quick summary again, the new winner is Bitfarms. They came second last time I did this. CleanSpark is now number 2, and HIVE is in third place. And remember, the focus is on which miners can thrive after the halving. Again, third time I'm mentioning that. So a lot of material here. You can always get the Substack every day, every video summarized with all the images, graphics, data, write-ups. 13 cents an issue. And a big thank to everyone on Patreon who voted on me doing this. I think 76% of Patreon community wanted me to do a mining video. So hope you like that. Be careful, everybody. These things are very volatile. If you look at the miner performance, they are all over the place. And that's what we like. When you can time when things are overvalued versus undervalued, swap in and out, you can make a living just from trading mining stocks because they're that crazy. So big thank you everybody out there. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope I didn't offend anybody's backs. Jim Manley, Wolf is radioactive. And that's not radioactive, but it is absolutely carbon free for the fans of that type of stuff too. Killigly, good to see you, buddy, and everybody else in there. Thank you for watching. I much appreciate hitting the like on the way out. There's a lot of work that goes into this. You just see the condensed summary. So with that, everybody, Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it'll help you make decisions in the future. Thank you all. Good night.